The title of Dina's presentation is already visible on the screen, Media Dependency in a Multiple Crisis, and I'll let Dina introduce it and go on. Dina, you have your 30 minutes, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Zlatan, and hello everyone. I hope you're enjoying the course and Dubrovnik. Yes, I will, as Zlatan said, I will actually speak today about how media use and how audiences navigated their media use and information seeking during crisis period during COVID-19 pandemic after an earthquake that hit Zagreb 4 years ago. And what role did media trust have in this situation? So it's focusing on a very specific period of time. I will start with the theoretical framework. Media dependency theory, as you know, is developed by Sandra Bal-Rokiac in 1970s. And she defines media dependency as a relationship in which the capacity of individuals to attain their goals is contingent upon the information sources in the media system. What Sandra Bal-Rokiac actually wanted to explain was how the media system also relates to other social systems in the society. She was inspired a lot from the sociological theories of the social systems and how this systemic level refers from the macro dimension refers also to the individual practices of, for example, individual media use from media audiences. She developed this theory thinking that this also individual media use can be explained by how by functions also in the different social spheres. So audiences will use media if there are no other functional alternatives of behavior, and also they will be more dependent on media use when other social systems are dependent on the media system. Just to now give additional explanation of this. In her theoretical framework, she also saw that different social systems are interrelated and interdependent, but on various levels. So, for example, economic and political systems are much more dependent, let's say, or interconnected with the media system than some other social systems. So in the economical system, if we have a level of production, maybe on this, let's say, macro level, if producers want to connect themselves with consumers, and the connection of the economic system with the consumption behavior of individual consumers, it's almost impossible without the media system. It's because the connection between the production and consumption is done through advertising, which exists in the media system. Also political system, we are now in the super election year, so we are very much aware that without the media system, it would be very difficult for political institutions and political actors to connect with citizens. On the other hand, some other social systems like educational are much less interconnected with media. So they're, let's say, the relationship is more asymmetric between the educational and the media system. Although, for example, mediatization theory, we can see that the media system dependency theory has some similarities with mediatization theory. It teaches us that more and more spheres of social life and more social systems are shaped by media. So also educational system, we saw it also during the COVID-19 period. where educational system was much more dependent on media technologies. It was much more difficult, for example, for teachers to engage with students without the media technologies, which mediated this relationship. So that means that audiences will use media to actually navigate themselves in their social life in these different social systems. To explain media use, Balrokiac explained it in terms of goals which audiences have. These goals can be goals of understanding, which can be understanding can be social or self. So audiences can use media to understand the social world, what is going on in the social world, like through following news, information seeking, or to understand themselves. They can use media to orient themselves towards, and this orientation can also be more inward looking, to orient themselves in what to do in specific situations, like, or decide what to buy, how to resolve problems. Or orientation can also be more social. They can learn how to or inform themselves or how to interact with other people in different social situations. And goals of play. So they can be oriented toward using media for relaxation, entertainment, which can also be solitary or with others. And we can see here also that there are similarities between this theory and the uses and gratifications theory in explaining the individual media use. As media dependency theory was developed in the 1970s, it referred, when it spoke about the media system, it referred mostly to the mass media institutions, or let's say traditional media institutions. So Balrokiac with Kim and Matei, they proposed, developed or updated version of the media dependency theory, which they called communication infrastructure theory, and which sees the media system more, which they see it more in a network structure, like which is shaped by internet and digital technologies. So they see the media system more as a, they call it a storytelling network, set from the different types of media and communication platforms. And they also used a different word for explaining, for referring to dependency. They use the word connectedness, which describes the relation between individuals and media platforms in general. And we can see from this that the imagined power relations are also different. If audiences are dependent on the media systems, that means that the system dimension is much more powerful than the, let's say, individual behavior. While using the term connectedness, it's more neutral, let's say, and it's imagined that the power structure is more balanced between the users and media technologies, which can be criticized. But so this is how they try to update the theory to the digital media environment. The media dependency theory in research was used a lot to explain behavior of audiences during different crises. And it is expected that audiences will be more dependent on media when there is a period of certain social disruption, conflict, which shatters the ontological security which individuals have. So, for example, it was research in the context of war, terrorist and other attacks, health crises, natural catastrophes like earthquakes or floods, industrial or man-made accidents. And all this research saw that there is a heightened use of media and need, let's say, for media, and the use of media for these goals audiences to navigate themselves in this new social environment. And there's also assumption that the media use at that period alleviates this sense of anxiety, insecurity, and information seeking, that it's helpful for alleviating this psychological distress in the period of social disruption. These articles, which I quoted here, this research is done mostly when the media system was digitalized. So let's say these networked media systems, but they referred to they didn't refer to these updated theories of media dependency. They used let's say the postulates of the original media dependency theory, and it explained the behavior of media users at that period. We can also learn some other aspects from research which was done using the media dependency theory, also in the connection with trust. Usually it is assumed that media dependency is higher in less plural societies, for example, in authoritarian and closed systems, because there are no other functional, there are less functional alternatives for audiences, so they have to depend, let's say, on the media for a lot of behaviors. So even if media trust is low in such systems, the dependency is high. The development of the digital media environment changes these situations. So it allows audiences who feel less dependent on mainstream media and who have less media trust to tend to seek out alternative or non-media sources of information to fulfill their information needs. This is also why research showed that this behavior could be explained by different inequalities. So, for example, education is very important in explaining which sources will audiences use, also depending on their trust. And we can see that this a transfer, let's say, to different sources, to the digital sources, also works when there's a digital media environment, also in the authoritarian system. So in China, during the SARS epidemic in 2003, audiences, although they were dependent on media, as they perceived mainstream media as governmentally controlled, they turned away from it and looked for alternative online news sources to fulfill their goals. Media dependency theory can also explain a lot of behavior and a lot of media use during the COVID-19 pandemic. We know that the use of both traditional and digital media increased sharply, especially television and digital media. There was a rise of media trust, which can be explained by the media dependency, because it was a crisis event, and audiences turned to media to explain this new situation. However, there was a decline of trust and news avoidance after this initial upsurge. Inequality was an important aspect of media use, and its researchers also identified infodemically vulnerable audiences, those who consumed news less, who had less trust in media, which was defined by age, gender, income, education, and who were more vulnerable to misinformation during the period. This behavior of audiences is important because what was also shown is that there is a link between information seeking and reducing vaccine hesitancy. So behavior of audiences explained also other, let's say health-related behavior, which is also a part of the media dependency theory, because media dependency theory expects that the heightened need for media, dependency on media during, for example, crisis, will also make the media effects higher in this period. So it will also, it's possible that other social effects from the media will be higher in these times of crisis. So the context of the study, as I said, the study was done in April 2020. In March 2020, state of emergency was proclaimed due to COVID-19 pandemic, with different measures for curbing the pandemic. So a lot of public institutions were closed, all the schools or all the university, the teaching was online. So most of the professions they had to work inside, so they outside of the institutions they had to transfer online. Those who worked in professions which were essential left home, but there were strong measures to also curb, let's say, the social interaction between people, as you know, to minimize the spread of the virus. There was a strong campaign, stay at home, so people were advised to live in the confinements of their home, of their household. In the end of March 2020, an earthquake hit capital city of Zagreb with a magnitude of 5.5 on the Richter scale. It provoked a huge damage to the city infrastructure. Fortunately, there were not many victims, but still a lot of people lost their homes overnight. They have to leave homes, and there were also a lot of several aftershocks after the earthquake, and this caused another level of stress, which was already present because of the pandemic. So research questions were: what goals guided audiences in their media use? Which inequalities shapes media use and goals? What was the relationship between media use goals and the use of different media platforms? So to explain this dependency in the digital media environment, and what was the relationship between trust in media and media use? The research was done, the online survey was done in April 2020. This was a part of the course at the Faculty of Political Science, where students engaged in a research project guided by the mentor. So the course was, we decided because in the middle of the course, there was the lockdown and then the earthquake. So we decided to study this. So the online survey was created. The sample was convenience. The number of respondents was 741. This is obviously a limitation of research, and you can see that the sample is biased towards certain social groups. Women, who form 77% of the sample, younger age groups, 60% of the sample. We were also interested from which region are respondents, so were they affected by an earthquake or not? So almost 40% were from the region affected by an earthquake, almost 60% were not from the region. and most of the respondents were isolated at home, 86.6% at the time, which was expected because these were the measures. So we measured for the dependent variables frequency of media use, different media types, media use goals. I will explain this later. And for independent variables, socio-demographic, perception of threat and stress coping strategies, which I will not focus on that much, and trust in media and perception of misinformation. I will just go now to the next slide to explain the dependent variables. We measured really different types of media use on different platforms. Here, this is a correlation matrix, which shows the correlation between media trust, two types of media trust, generalized media trust, which refers to trust in all media, and personal media trust, which refers to trust in media people personally use, with these different media platforms. We can see that the generalized media trust is correlated much more to a wider array of platform or sources of media sources, with commercial TV, public TV, radio, print media, digital editions of print media, digital-born media, digital official sources. We also measured, because at that time there were websites and applications developed for citizens to follow information, for example, about COVID-19 or seismic activity. So these were these digital official sources which were important at that time. And it is negatively correlated with following social media posts. The personal media trust is also correlated with some media use, but with narrower array. So because we measured media use with so many different variables, having a smaller number of variables in the further analysis, we did a factor analysis, and we came up with 3 factors or indexes, let's say, of media use. Television use, which refers to the use of public and commercial television. Online media, which refers to use of digital media, which are either digital versions of print media or digital-born media. International media, and digital official sources. And social media use refers to social media following and posting, instant messaging, streaming platforms, YouTube. Then we wanted to understand what goals did audiences have in their media use. The analysis found that there are 3 most important goals: goal of social understanding, goal of self-understanding, and goal of play and communication. They resemble the Balrog-Kiech media dependency goals. So social understanding is a mixture between social understanding and orientation. So this is goal to get information on how to behave towards others, to get information about current events, to help me decide what to do in a certain situation, to understand the future consequences of this situation. Self-understanding refers to, for example, to think about me after this situation ends, to create an everyday routine in a new situation, to express how I feel, so it's more inward oriented. And play and communication, to entertain myself with others, to relax, and to communicate with others. When we see the mean values of these goals, we can see that the most important goal was social understanding. Then after social understanding, playing communication, which is also understandable because sociality was mediated at the time. And in the end, self and understanding. We also did a regression analysis to understand both media use and the media use goals. So I will go through the results. Television use is explained mostly by generalized trust in all media. By age, older audiences use television more. By gender, women use television more, and it was explained by social understanding, by these needs to understand the social world. Online media use, which are digital media, also these are digital official sources, is explained by social understanding, by fact-checking practices. That was a need of audiences to check if the information was true, by education. So those who are more highly educated use these sources. And it was also explained by feelings of more efficacy to evaluate what is misinformation, to evaluate so those who felt that they have more efficacy to evaluate what is true and what is not, used online media. Social media use is explained mostly by play and communication, also by self-understanding, also by fact-checking practices, but mostly it was explained by age, and younger audiences use social media more. What was also interesting is the context and the media use. So there were no significant differences in media use between those, so in the total media use between those who were isolated at home or weren't isolated, or those who were in the earthquake region and those who were not, but there were differences in goals of media use. So I'll just go to these explanations of understanding the goals of media use. So social understanding is explained, predicted the most with the trust in media and generalized trust in media, online media use, fact-checking practices, and it was also explained by isolation. So being more, those who are more isolated felt more need to understand the social world. Self-understanding was explained mostly by social media use, by less efficacy. So those who felt that they are that they have less efficacy in evaluating what is true and what is not, they were more inward oriented. It was explained, predicted also by the trust in media and by less education, being isolated at home, and women also were more inward looking in the media use. In the end, play and communication was explained the most by social media use. Also, those who felt as being more exposed to information, they also turned more to these uses of media, like entertainment uses of media. And this was also explained by isolation. Those who were more isolated at home used media more for play and communication. Women used also media more for play and communication, and younger media audiences also had these goals of use. So the conclusions in the end from all of this is that despite having high media choice, the goal of social understanding is mostly connected to professional news sources. So just because it was mostly connected to this online media, which comprises of digital media, which are mostly news media, so means professional news media and digital official sources, while social media were more important for play and communication purposes. So despite this digital media environment, still media were more, users were more dependent on these professional news sources for this goal of social understanding. There was a role of inequalities in explained media use. Education was especially important for online media use. So, for example, news. So this is for news orientation. There was a generational divide where older audiences relied more on traditional media sources and younger audiences more on social media. And there was also what was noticed as gendered media use, where women were more inward-looking, let's say, in the media use, which can be explained by gender inequalities in the way the burden of crisis was distributed. As one research showed, is that the women were very burdened by keeping the household well while there was a lockdown. Women were mostly responsible um, for changing the household routines and for the household when the life was inside, and they also had the highest emotional burden of this lockdown. So this can also perhaps explain this inward looking media use. The role of trust, there was a strongest association of trust with traditional media use, with television, and with social understanding goal. And perception of misinformation was also important. So those who felt that they had less efficacy in evaluating misinformation, they actually had more this inward looking media use. So they used online media, professional news less, and they were more oriented towards these self-understanding goals. Those who felt that they were exposed to misinformation turned to the plain communication media use. While fact-checking practices were connected to the media use in general, and to online media use, for example, and to social understanding. So these are the conclusions. We can see that the media dependency theory can be used also to explain this navigation and information seeking in a digital media environment, and how it is important to look at it in connection with inequalities of media audiences, and interconnected also with the media trust. And this presentation is based mostly article which was published in 2023. The authors are me, Michaela Michalec, and Laura Hanna Removic. So this is where it was published, and these are the references I referred to. And now, thank you for listening.